Inspiring Honesty. Greg Brahe is an atheist, and I'm his guest, Joey Livingston, with co-host Bob Greaves. Greg hijacked my intro last show, so revenge is sweet. Go ahead, Greg.
I planned for that, actually, because, you see, in the last show, Joey and I, we were discussing monogamy versus polyamory in a normative sense. Joey is making the argument that people should want to be monogamous. It is better to be monogamous for primarily the reason, not to put words into your mouth, but that it is better to want to devote your entire life to getting to know a single person and exploring your love for you that you have for that one person than to separate that love among multiple people and even to hold the mindset that you are not worthy of somebody else's reciprocal attention.
Singular devotion, both sexually and non-sexually.
All right. Now, I find this ironic because I'm happy to be part of Inspiring Honesty now, where we have been joined by a third to help sort this out. I mean, sometimes having a third can really help.
These are friendships. These are friendships, Greg.
And well, that's the distinction that I want to make, is that the argument that one person should be worthy of or should expect to be worthy of another person's devotion entirely and singularly in such a way is an unreasonable expectation, because there's other things that draw people's attention through all of their life, including their children, their job, their hobbies, their personal desires. I can tell you what, I personally would love it if my wife got a boyfriend, because she really requires a lot more affection and time together than I want to devote to it. And I'm sure somebody else could pick up that slack where I can do the hobbies that I want to do. We don't have the same needs for that affection and that desire for being constantly surrounded and doted upon and loved. She wants more of it. As a matter of fact, I probably would be just as happy actually having separate bedrooms where I get like a whole bed to myself instead of this much of it, where she's scooting over to cuddle with me all night and I'm really warm. And maybe she can find somebody who's a better cuddler than I am. I don't know. I can tell you, though, that there are practical ways to understand romantic love outside of a singular monogamous context that has a possessive sense where you are expecting somebody else to be solely devoted to you. And the argument that I made in the past one is that it is actually more mature to understand these feelings or relationships in such a way that you do not have an expectation of exclusivity due to things like jealousy or a personal desire to be the singular object of attention. I think that those are relatively childish and selfish ways of looking at a relationship. And my argument stems from that I see the maturity aspect of it being that jealousy is an emotion that we feel in the same way we feel anger or sadness or lust or any other thing that can afflict our hearts and our minds. And the maturity aspect of it is how we react to those feelings and how we bring ourselves through those. I believe it is more mature to react to jealousy.
There's a polygamous dog orgy going on somewhere.
I am dog sitting for my mom's two dogs, and they're okay. Barking. I would close the window, but it's way too hot to do that. So, unfortunately, you guys are going to need to deal with the barking.
I hope they're having fun.
Joey, I'm just curious. Did you make? I didn't catch the previous program. So, did you make an argument about singular devotion?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm very strongly in favor of it, but Greg is framing it in a way that I did not frame it.
Okay, because I was going to say the way it's being framed strikes me as irrelevant to the question.
Certainly, I don't think jealousy. I agree that jealousy is an immature trait. I also agree that. Well, I don't think that what we're talking about here is singular in terms of friendship, but most devoted. Everybody's going to have multiple friends, but when it comes to your life partner, that should be your dearest and closest friend. Or if it doesn't become that, then perhaps that's not the right partner for you. As far as sex goes, that should be a devoted relationship between you and that person, and there's plenty to explore there without having to spread that out to other people.
Well, and the argument that we're making here is, why can we use the word should for either of those things? What makes that normative? That, in your opinion, in your relationships, that may very well be true. But what if I don't feel the same way? What if I don't have that expectation that I should be the...
Yes. And again, I am not arguing that we monogamists should go out on a campaign and try to force polygamists to become monogamous. But if you ask my opinion about whether I believe that relationship is the pinnacle or the end of what a relationship should be, or that it is an equivalent, I will tell you, no, I don't think that it is the most healthy form of relationship nor the most beneficial.
And Greg, I didn't understand. You talked about how you thought more maturity was shown in how you respond to this. So in what way is the response of saying that, well, since I'm going to be having moments of lust and attraction, and since I don't always feel like I should be doting over my wife to the degree she would like it, I wish she had a boyfriend. How is that a response that is, as you would define it, more mature, where someone might argue that, well, that's an example of where a different response might be more mature. So how do you argue that that's the more mature?
Actually, I'm not discussing specifically my responses in that. I'm talking about jealousy when I say that the more mature response to jealousy, much like anger. I think jealousy is an inherently negative emotion. It's something that it's upsetting us. And the more mature response to something that is upsetting us is to try to understand why that's upsetting us, to discuss it with the people who are involved, and to see if there's a way that we can work through it in a way that is mutually agreeable for us. Now, polyamorous couples or polyamorous individuals are not devoid of jealousy. They simply react to jealousy differently than other people do. I can say that I am nearly devoid of jealousy in most of the traditional senses that other people, I just don't understand it. It's a very odd concept.
Can you give me a definition that you can stick with throughout this conversation for what you mean by jealousy? Because that actually isn't something that we explored a lot on Clash Course.
It's hard to give it a non-circular. Jealousy is envy. It is a possessive understanding of your relationship, and that this person is either taking what I want, or basically, it's the best way for me to describe it is to say that jealousy would be for me to say that my wife cannot have a relationship outside of our marriage, or to be upset by my wife having a relationship or wanting a
sexual relationship or a non-sexual relationship.
A sexual or flirtatious, romantic, things of these. I mean, I think that.
So you think that if
cultural understanding of jealousy.
If I don't want my wife to have a sexual relationship outside of our relationship, that is jealousy.
Yes.
So sometimes when you use the word jealousy, you might mean that you have an angry reaction to that, and you are possessive in the sense of you are mine. Let's see if we can break this down to something simpler.
I guess I agreed.
Jealousy
I said yes
be the only reason why a person wouldn't want their wife to have a sexual relationship with someone else.
Right. I think it's the jealousy is the emotional drive for not wanting your wife to have a sexual relationship with somebody else.
Well, first of all, Bob just asked a great question, but I actually want to go back to that. But let's call jealousy for a moment a desire for attention that you don't have. Okay?
That's That's a decent definition.
Okay.
And anger is one way that
I think only half of the coin, though.
And anger is one way
that attention that you don't have, and a desire for other people to not have attention that you want.
Okay. So but
or that you do have even.
But it's possible to have the first without the second.
Sure, and it's possible to have the second without the first.
And there are ways of dealing with these emotions. We can deal with anger, or we can deal with it by letting go. And there are others, but those are two that we can name.
Right.
Okay. So I'll stop there for a moment. Let's go back to Bob's question. Bob, can you ask that again, please?
I asked if jealousy is the only reason why a person would not want their spouse to be having a sexual relationship with someone else.
And Greg, you seem to say that is always the underlying reason.
Well, I can't say that, because we have made the distinction that there is certainly a health risk factor, or a potential instability in that, a fear of the unknown. But that is still in a way related to jealousy, in that if your wife ends up in a relationship,
I could think of other things that enter in, and if you'd rather I play the arbiter role, I will back off.
I don't want that.
No, please. We want you to be part of it.
Neither one of us want the arbiter role, Bob. We want you to jump in.
Okay. To me, for example, my wife and I own a home. We own it together. Based on law, if we split up, without regard to whose income or whose assets made this home possible, since it was acquired after we were married, that gets split. What do I have a reasonable expectation to think that that which I have worked hard at and have been fortunate enough to acquire is in some way reasonably safe? I would think that if we were going to have a polyamorous situation, that we'd have to really alter a lot of laws so that people who bring assets into a relationship are not putting those assets at great risk simply because someone decides, they're going to take off and move in some other direction. I think that would also cause a lot of people to be not so willing to bring assets into a relationship. Do you think that just simply the practicality of the difficulty of acquiring sufficient assets as to prepare for retirement is? What if my wife is a nanny, so she works, and neither of us are like spectacular earners, where like one of us is earning 7 times as much as the other one is. But what would prevent a housewife from enjoying all the acquired assets, and then when her husband retires, take half of them with her and then go find somebody else?
Well, what's preventing that now is the other question. I mean, that would certainly be a dynamic that is associated with any relationship, is the degree of trust that you have to have with the other individuals involved. Of course,
but also the fact that there was an expectation that both people will recognize they are moving against, and there's a different psychological inertia, certain that is different.
Sure, and that's I meant to say when I was bringing up the fear of the unknown, is that the security aspect is a legitimate aspect. That it certainly does add a factor of instability and potential detriment to your relationship, especially if you've not done this before. If this is your first polyamorous relationship and your significant other's first polyamorous, or if you're in a monogamous relationship and decide to open it into a polyamorous one, that's taking a big risk. Now, if you consider yourself to be a polyamorous individual before you enter into any relationship, and if the relationships begin from this point, that's a completely different.
Totally different.
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm trying to look at it as a relationship philosophy. So that's why I'm trying to avoid the descriptive sense, because that it tends to look at then, because the standard is monogamy, then to say, well, if we're starting from a monogamous standpoint, why would we deviate? And I don't want to start from a monogamous standpoint. I want to start from a individual standpoint who wants to approach relationships. I think it's best to consider this as as all single people, and what they should want or desire, or what they can want and desire.
It would seem to me it would lead to a situation, though, where everybody becomes financially single. I know a number of people who are married to people whose income is radically higher than their spouses. And I would think that some of these people would be far more insecure in that relationship if they weren't entitled to take half with them if it were to end.
And I'm sure you're right.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that we would have provisions.
So I see as part of our cultural structure of institutional society is currently not even set up for that. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I could see that the lack of an appropriate structure is a good reason to avoid those complications. But then again, it causes me to wonder, what sort of a societal structure could we create? Can we take a look at maybe, are there certain, for example, there's certain Indian cultures, native Indian cultures that were discovered in this country when the Europeans first got here, where all the men would live in one large hut and all the women would live in another large hut. And although there were spousal relationships, they didn't live together. And part of that was because of their cultural need for protecting the women, for huddling the men together, creating things around the field of corn or whatever, just their lifestyle developed around that. They had a structure where I could see in that structure, it was more of a communal property for everything anyway. But
I think that
gotta be honest with you, I'm not familiar anthropologically with what the divorce rate was or anything like that for such cultures. I don't know.
Well, and I don't know that either, but I will say that we do have some analogs that may help us understand ways that we could equitably divide things, even in multiple individual situations. And the best analog to that is not currently our marriage structure, because that's been a binary situation for such a long time that it's extremely culturally ingrained. But inheritance is a wonderful example of how things can be doled out equally or equitably, or based on a person's or the agreements made, or any other manner of decision, even if it's entirely arbitrary by the person who is writing the will, can certainly determine ways that they can distribute things. And we can. I'm
not sure what are you talking about? How do you put the will into that? It's not clear to me what your point is.
I think that the primary method of handling a marriage in any sort of polyamorous society would, of course, be to make it non-standard. Just have marriage agreements that are drafted by the individuals, or different standards, multiple standards, things that people can choose going into it how they want to divide it on the way out.
Do you know that there's never been a society that has ever maintained the laws of marriage based on what the married couple want? In other words, every society that possesses some form of what we call marriage has always considered the marriage to be a contract between the couple and the community, a contract that isn't in other words, this isn't just a contract with two parties.
Oh, sure. Well, because what interest would the community have in even recognizing a marriage if it weren't for such a benefit to the community?
Right.
But so that's a completely separate aspect.
Possibly why manage such.
Unfortunately, with
contracts.
You entering into this one a little later, we have tried to sort of avoid the marriage aspect, because that does add a huge extra degree of complication. And this is, I've been trying to.
I haven't tried to avoid the marriage aspect. I simply haven't used the word.
Well, I've been trying to separate the marriage aspect, at least, from. This is, again, a relationship philosophy in my mind. The marriage portion of it would be something that would have to, I think, be then determined as an aside, separate from this particular question.
In what way would it be an aside?
And informed by it, but In the same way that marriage issues are not. I mean, we've had homosexual coupling
Sure.
forever.
But you're talking about,
but not
we are
homosexual
talking
marriage,
about
so.
the way that people agree to relate to one another intimately. And this is in a very real sense the definition of what marriage is. It is a contract that describes how people are going to relate to one another intimately. And although
That's true.
and
but it's
although
bringing
the,
in
and
a
although the
third party that's
legal
not involved
although the
directly in it.
legal form of marriage has not been recognized by the government for homosexual couples, there has certainly been agreements between homosexual couples that are in a very real sense a marriage.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say marriage as in a sort of a contractual agreement between those individuals was not being considered. I meant that the civil action of marriage, as Bob just described it, with the agreement between those individuals and the community or the state.
Yeah.
The,
I mean,
the
when you-
legal aspect of it is, I think,
when
what
you
I wanted to avoid.
when you throw the legal aspect in, it becomes extremely complicated. But I'm not sure whether that complication is something that is that it's something that we should necessarily avoid here, because the legal aspect, in a sense, it informs all of the dynamics that we're talking about here, simply but avoiding simply by not using the word marriage. Marriage is in a sense a description of those relationships, and we're sitting here trying to describe them.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of cities that actually have ordinances that prohibit 3 or more people to live in the same dwelling who are not related to each other.
I'm assuming adults.
3 or more people who are not related to each other.
Oh, related, because the children would be related. That would make sense.
And of course, for many towns that have that sort of an ordinance, the real reason for it is to avoid radically random student housing occurring in residential sections.
Right.
But that tends to be the reason for such ordinances. But with such ordinances, a polyamorous situation where a marriage contract didn't exist would actually be, on that basis, disallowed.
Only assuming that they're actually living together.
What's that again?
That's only assuming that they're actually living together. Because again, when I'm talking about polyamory and monogamy, I'm talking about individual personal perspectives on what a relationship should be, not necessarily a description on what it actually manifests as. Because I frankly consider myself to be polyamorous. I am in a monogamous relationship, but I would have no problem with my wife having an additional partner outside of our relationship, and it would not have to be I wouldn't put requirements on her that, well, I mean, she can find a nice bisexual female and we can no.
And if your wife allowed it, would you want to have another sexual partner?
No, not at this point, at least.
He says as he takes a drink of water.
I can say.
You know, I'm curious about one thing. Greg, a number of shows ago, I don't recall how long ago, but it's quite a while back, you shared what was, for me, I thought, a very touching moment, where you talked about how there are certain relatives you've been close to that have since gone on, and you know, they've died, and how you recognize with great sadness how you're never going to see these people again. And you even teared up. I thought there was a real genuineness in your facing the real implications of what it means for you to be an atheist. And it was extremely touching moment. I think a lot of people who saw that were very touched. But my question is this, if we were to be in a polyamorous situation, wouldn't you have then thereby a number of uncles and other people like that who would be coming and going? That there would be less
I mean, my parents have
stable...
both been married 3 times, so I've experienced that, actually.
Yeah.
So,
and it does create a lack of stability in extended family, and I really think that one of the things that we're suffering from here in America already is through divorce, a lack of stability in extended family, but also through the tremendous way in which we move about the country. I mean, I have there's 7 siblings in my family, and we are just all over the place. And in terms of being an extended family, we're basically we just know that we're connected. There's no. My sisters aren't over here for picnics and dinners and birthdays, and now I do have I have a sister who does live in this area, but I've been she's estranged from everyone else in the family, pretty much. I think there's one other sister she might actually be talking to. I don't know for sure, but I had a brother who was living here, and we of course get together so often. But now his job changed, and he's down in North Carolina. It's just the way we move around creates a lack of stability, and I think that in some ways our kids are growing up without the balance that comes from multi-generational and multi-perspectival relatives who are all a part of that constant interaction, and but there's nonetheless a connection of family. I really think that the development of kids is suffering as a result of that. Personally, I think it's counter-developmental.
That's a great point.
Well, I can certainly see that it's changing, and that it suffered because of a lot of the cultural aspects.
So for example, let's say that I'm in a polyamorous relationship, and I make love to this woman, and we have 2 children, and then she decides that she wants a second partner. I agree with that. I also want a second partner, not her partner. I would like somebody else. We agree to allow those people to enter into the relationship. I have sex with another woman. She has sex with another man. She has other children by that man, and the woman that I have sex with also has children. And then that happens maybe one more time. What set of children should I bring my life's experience and philosophy to? That's question one. The second question is, should I be concerned about the life and the life experience and philosophy that the other men are imposing into the children who are also my children, but are spending time with them because they share a mother?
My answers to that would certainly be yes and yes. You should, or well, the first one I guess was not a yes, but all of them, and yes. You should both be trying to impart your life experience and your philosophy on all of the.
And should I be concerned about the philosophy that another man is imposing into my children?
Yes, you should indeed, and it's something that
should we make sure that we have the same disciplinary tactics
of parenting in any situation. I mean, I think that we currently, I think in America specifically, we have focused on such a large degree of individualism that we have truncated the family down to the parents, and that's it.
Okay, but what if I have a non-physical approach to discipline to my children, of reasoning with them and leading them gently, and another man who also has a father relationship with my children because they share the same mother believes in strong discipline, not something that's illegal, but spanking and saying, you will mind me no matter what, and I really don't care about your opinion because you're a child?
Well, I think that there's a couple aspects to that. Of course, that you are trusting the people that you're reproducing with to have judgment similar to your own in their other
and also to have sex
course,
with other people that have the identical philosophy.
But you do have parental rights as well to make these decisions for the offspring that are yours.
Once children are out of your home, in many states, if the children are living in a home and if they're living usually with their mother, and the father has a different philosophy as to how those children should be raised,
I can't stop that.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
As long as
you
it's
have
legal.
Input is, I guess, what I mean. You have parental rights and you have input. But I think that you're creating a bit of a
likely scenario. That's what I'm
no,
creating.
I think that you're creating a false dichotomy here and saying that we either need to have monogamy or we're going to have that, because we have plenty of that in monogamy now. I mean, that's a very,
and it hurts
very
children
common thing.
Because it's very unlikely that we all have the same philosophies, and children become confused because they don't know who to listen to.
And it maybe, I mean, hear me out on this one. Maybe if we were a little bit less jealous and a little bit more open to bringing other people into our relationships instead of separating our relationships out, if divorces were amicable and something, it was our relationship grew apart, or, I mean, a breakup less than a divorce in that respect, where you can still like the people that you're dealing with. And frankly, I think a lot of the ugly, mean divorces have to do with cheating and jealousy and things where something was not openly communicated well. So I think that we're looking at upending the entire dynamic of relationships as they are. But
you're saying divorce. You're saying divorce wouldn't happen because of polygamy, but yet the same parental dynamic would occur within polygamy.
No,
so
I'm
divorce
saying that
is
there
not
would
the issue
be
here.
differences, of course, of parental dynamics, but you'd still have them. And I think that we have those differences in parental dynamics without polygamy as well. I mean,
But you do not have that within a successful monogamous relationship.
But you can, I mean, you can't project the future and say it's going to be a successful monogamous relationship. Monogamous relationships end.
It's
and they
true
end for
that you
reasons
can't
that are
see
outside
the
of our
future.
control.
But I didn't
And many of the
argue.
reasons
I didn't
that they
argue
end-
that all monogamous relationships should be successful. What I argued was that a successful monogamous relationship was the most beneficial for the people who chose it and carried it out. That's what I said.
Again, that is a very descriptive term. And I objected to it as a normative sense, that we can't say because a successful monogamous relationship is the best for raising children or whatever arbitrary standard you want to give it. We have to say, or we cannot go from that to say that therefore people should want.
So then
that.
you will grant me. So then you will grant me that descriptively a successful monogamous relationship is the most beneficial.
I'd have to weigh a case by case to be true to that, but I'd say on average, it is quite possibly the case. It does, of course, depend on how the polyamory is handled. If we have 3 adults all living together, then that's an extra set of hands. It's an extra income, and it's potentially an opportunity for somebody to stay at home with the children and give them a more stable home life than you can have with only 2 parents. You can have a double income home and a stay-at-home parent. I mean, it's the best of both worlds in that respect. So who knows what polyamory might manifest as.
And I agree that when you decide to devote your life to somebody and you expect for that relationship to last until death do us part, that you are taking a risk. But some risks are worth taking. And in my opinion, that there aren't many more risks that are worth taking with somebody who is very, very special to you.
Yeah, something that maybe I don't want to take us back to where we've already left if we've dealt with it sufficiently. In my current marriage, and this is for me a second marriage. We've been married for we got married in 1988. But I did have a previous marriage. My wife has never been married before. But in our relationship, although I don't think either of us have the least bit of interest of any sort, legally or whatever, to explore any farther than where we're at. But I can tell you this: in our relationship, the concept of jealousy doesn't even exist in our relationship, and our expectation of that we have a monogamous relationship or that's what we're in as far as that, has nothing to do with jealousy whatsoever, nor does it have anything to do with any expectation that there's going to be singular devotion. The truth is, I don't want my wife to be devoted to me in any manner other than what she finds meaningful to be devoted, and I certainly don't expect anything from her towards me in that expectation. But so I mean, in our relationship, that has nothing to do with why we are in a committed monogamous relationship.
Would you say it's a mutual contentment, Bob?
I guess, to be honest with you, I don't even stop to think about it. We've been on an adventure together. We've gone through a great deal together. I tell you, having your house destroyed by a flood twice, and coming together to adequately respond to it all, really brings you close. We've struggled through other issues together, and we like being together. It's awesome. And I'll tell you, as the years go on, I find myself more happily married than I ever understood being married could be happy. And there's something about the singularity of it that is certainly a part of it. But nonetheless, I just can't picture being any other way personally.
Greg, you said in the prior show that the way that we feel our sexual attractions, who we love, etc., is not a choice. And I said that to some extent I agree with that. But within a successful monogamous relationship, that it is not as if this whole relationship is out of your control. It is at the beginning, especially when you're young, it can be a day-to-day choice. There can be a lot of things that you battle with and a lot of choices that you make because of those battles. But as you get older and as you get more and more content with this friendship, with this relationship, with the sexual dynamic, those choices, those battles within you certainly do calm down. There are choices that we make within.
I agree that I think that there's settling that happens over time,
and you can make a choice when that desire comes up. Oh, I'm sexually attracted to somebody else. You can make a choice. I will give in to that desire, and in that case, you are certainly taking this from a monogamous relationship to something else, something cheating or polygamy, whatever you want to call it. But you can also make the choice that I am not going to give in to that desire. A good friend of mine once said that we are all animals, and we have desires within us that come from thousands of years of evolution, of breeding dynamics, etc. And in a civilized world, all of us battle with those animal desires, and we all are free to choose how we deal with those animal desires. And what I am saying is that if we choose to deal with our sexual desires and our intimate desires in a way that devotes ourselves to one person, that we engender a rich relationship that we wouldn't have otherwise. And the more you make that choice for one person, some of these relationships are not right and they have to end, but some of them really work. And when you're in one that really works, you can ruin it. You can ruin one that doesn't work, and it's over, fine. But if you're in one that is working and you constantly make a choice to make it work, it is the most beautiful thing in terms of relationships, and that is where I stand.
Joey,
I think that
you're
also
absolutely
relationships
right
will, from time to time, face conundrums and challenges, and I don't think a relationship can long-term continue to be successful without a sense of commitment toward making it work. I think that if we were to live in a polyamorous culture, that commitment would have no real practical reason for existing, and I think it would, these relationships would only go so far, and as soon as it starts becoming inconvenient, I guess this wasn't meant to be or something. But getting back to one other thing that came up here, and that is the sexual attraction issue. My personal view of sexual attraction is that, you reach the age of puberty, and suddenly, for guys, it's these girls start looking good in a way you had never thought of before. But as time goes on, you do find yourself becoming a bit more selective in terms of what you find attractive.
This is it, Greg. This is that argument that I was talking about.
Yep.
This is awesome. Listen, go ahead.
Bob, I'm going to ask you if you can make
what
it
happens
concise, because
is,
there's
as
something I
you
really want to get
mature,
to.
you're really in an exploratory discovery of the sexuality. But I think that what happens is you get to a certain point where all attraction is based upon imaginary satisfaction or promise at some level. And when you are in a relationship with somebody where there has actually been delivery of promise, delivery of security, delivery of genuine, somebody who really has your best interests in mind and your well-being in mind, I would argue that a maturing sexuality begins to narrow and narrow and narrow until the person who is that person in your life becomes the one to whom you are most sexually attracted. And it has nothing to do with what they look like or this and that, but the fact that this is who they are. And I can say that, I can honestly say that in my own life, going through puberty and the stages and as to what I found attractive, there's a sense in which, some of the aspects of things that I found attractive still can gain my attention. But to me, that's nothing but a fleeting moment, and it's so
that's why I wanted to make
shallow and meaningless. But that the relationship that I have with my wife is one where who this person is to me so wonderful, so marvelous, so precious, that I find myself just powerfully attracted to her for reasons that are more, as I experience them, more closely associated with the fact that this is her. And
Bob,
I don't understand the shallowness, at least is the way I experience it, of, oh wow, look at that skinny hot chick over there with the balloon boobs, and then thinking, oh, let's have a relationship.
But we're thinking about this in a sexually open relationship standard only.
I couldn't hear you.
We're thinking about this only in the standard of a sexually open relationship. And again, coming from the monogamous perspective, we're already in a monogamous relationship and then going, oh, I want to do this. How do I react? And that's, again, where I'm talking about how we keep approaching this from that privilege. And yes, you're right that is the case that most people in America are in. I'm talking about it from a philosophical sense as an individual, what we should be looking at. And I will certainly say that, yeah, there is a large degree of shallowness to just wanting to screw anything that looks good and walks by. But
thank you.
That doesn't mean that that's the goal in a polyamorous relationship, that it might be allowed and open. But I think that you both have been right that we mature and our desires change over time. Our ideas of attraction change.
Motivations
settle down.
Change too.
And sometimes relationships grow together in that way. Sometimes they grow apart in what they want, and sometimes they grow differently together, but in such a way that they may not be meeting every desire of the others. And that might be the only situation where opening the marriage in a polyamorous or the relationship in a polyamorous situation is even appropriate.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you've just grown apart, then it's just best to separate.
But as we develop these relationships that are really
hold on, before we go off on a tangent, Joey, I wanted to say, you asked me a question earlier and I was taking a drink of my water and didn't fully answer it, but you asked me if I have had sexual desires outside of my wife, and I can tell you
that's not what I asked.
Or what was it?
I asked if your wife allowed you to have another sexual partner, would you have one?
I can say pretty confidently right now, I am not in a situation where that would be even relatable.
Well,
not the question.
If you are in that situation, yes, you.
Well, right. I know what I mean by that is, even if my wife allowed me to, there's not a prospect. There's not somebody that I'd be interested in doing that
with. But if there was,
I'm not talking about having the. Well, and that's where I think we need to go with this, is to say it's not just the. You're allowed to do it, therefore you're going to seek it out. Me saying that I think it might be better if my wife had a boyfriend doesn't mean I think she should go out and get a boyfriend.
Yeah. I'm using your own
means that
monogamous
if there was
relationship
somebody-
against you.
But
And that's
what
okay. I
can
respect
say-
your
No,
hesitance to answer that question.
No, let me answer this completely honestly here. There was a time, and it was very, very detrimental to our marriage. We had a pretty severe time, and I almost ended up divorcing because I fell in love with another woman. Well, I was still absolutely in love with my wife. And it was a very, very difficult moment for me and a difficult aspect to our relationship. And I'm not saying that this was me wanting to have sex with somebody because they walked by. It was a very close friend that over a lot of time I developed romantic feelings for before I even knew that they were developing. And suddenly I had a crisis on my hands, and I needed, for a large period of time, it was, as I understood it, an unrequited feeling, which it makes it easier to deal with. But when it was revealed that wasn't the case, I suddenly had this watershed moment that I needed to deal with. We collapsed to the wave function, if you will, and took it out of superposition. Recognized that yes, indeed, there is potential for an additional relationship, and
what was the relationship beyond friendship if it wasn't sex? If it wasn't sexual attraction, what was it besides friendship?
Well,
I love my friends. I fell in love with Matt. I fell in love with Sean the Sean. I fell in love with crew member.
I think though that you're making I think that you're trying to make a distinction where one can't necessarily be drawn.
I'm struggling to understand what's in between friendship and sex.
There's I think that
nobody will tell me. It's a big secret.
Romantic love makes sense. I think that people can understand and relate to that. And what I'm saying with it is that when that event happened to me, I had a choice to make. I had several choices to make. One, I could have lied. I could have snuck around. I could have kept secrets and had a sexual or romantic affair on the side. And frankly, looking back, I had a romantic affair on the side that was non-sexual. That my wife was not aware of.
No sexual desire. Romantic. But
there was sexual desire.
Okay.
But there's not sexual action.
But that's the point.
But no, that's not the point, Joey, because it was a very, very strong emotional bond that I had developed with somebody outside of the relationship without having the one for my wife suffer. But what specifically, my feelings for my wife did not suffer because I had developed these feelings. But romantic feelings come with more. I wanted companionship. I wanted to spend more time with this girl. I wanted to
friendship.
Yeah, I wanted more. I wanted to cuddle. I wanted to
So why did it end?
her, to kiss her, and things that are not okay with my wife.
Yeah.
And
why did it end?
Well, I had to make a choice again whether I was going to make a separation from my wife, or try to sneak around on or behind, or make a separation from this other woman, or try to make a polyamorous situation work. The choice that I made was to be honest with my wife and tell her about the feelings that I had developed. And it was a very difficult and emotional situation it was a lot of damage, again, done to our relationship. And partially because of the depth of feelings I had developed before I came to the point where I told my wife that it was happening. And it was because of fear, I guess, in being honest about that, because we were in a monogamous relationship, and I was experiencing cognitive dissonance. I wanted this new feeling and this romance to develop as it was going on, and it was thrilling. It was exciting. It was a new budding romance.
Greg,
yes.
To make a comment. Do you think that relationships involve dynamics that we can all be conscious of, aware of, and deal with simply rationally? Or is it possible that there are actually axes of a relationship that still represent elements of who we are as human beings that we don't even really fully understand?
Oh, I think that the latter is very, very certainly true, because I can tell you the way that it ended in this situation.
But your argument is a philosophical one. And maybe philosophy can think about things that involve an illusory world.
But my
that
argument is
for
against
whatever
a
reason,
philosophical
who
normative.
we are as beings in our actual being is not really going to work that well. The other comment I had is that if you ever decide you're not going to be an atheist, I would suggest you become a Mormon.
Well, the way that it ended.
I'm just kidding.
And this is going to be possibly another one of those moments here. But what happened is I told my wife everything, and it was difficult for her. It was difficult for us, and her desire was for me to not have contact with this person anymore, this girl.
Good for her.
And I.
Do you think that was out of jealousy?
I don't. I think that there was a lot of emotions playing a part in it. And obviously there was, I had betrayed her trust in ways and things that it was not as simple and cut and dry as it seems as I describe it now with a couple years of retrospect. But I can tell you my perspective from it, and that I had to make a choice, and it was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made in my life. I was heartbroken. It hurt severely. It still does to think about her.
Do you think it turned away from this other person?
I'm sorry?
To cut off this other person?
Yes, I've spoken to her twice, and both were incidental, running into her.
Do you think it hurts your wife more or less?
I'm sorry?
Do you think it hurts your wife more or less? And please understand where I'm coming from.
I understand.
You have bore yourself in this show, Greg, and
Definitely.
I so admire your honesty, not only in the show but in the decision that you made towards your wife. So please understand, I'm not trying to take advantage of how bare you are in this moment, but we are having a discussion, and I'm wanting, for the purpose of thought, what you think. Do you think your wife was hurt more or less than you were?
I think that she was hurt. Quite
more
a bit.
or less.
I'm not necessarily going to rank one of ours over the other. We had different kinds of pain that we experienced. I, of course, suffered much the same in the detriment to our relationship and the aftermath of this revelation.
Do you think you could have
as well as the additional side and of losing not only a woman that I had fallen in love with, losing all contact with her, but also she was a best friend. So it was hard. It was hard for me. It was hard for her, and I'm not necessarily capable of making a decision one way or the other.
We're out of time, so I'm not going to prod you with questions anymore. I have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion.
Let me
also add to Joey's comment there that your transparency with this is shockingly admirable, really. Because you really brought forth what you're thinking, and I guarantee you there's probably a lot of men who would agree with you, and it's quite possible that one of the big reasons why Joey and I aren't on that is because we have had what has been for us, I don't know how long you've been married, Joey, but we've had what has been for us a very meaningful monogamous relationship. I mean, me too.
And I don't mean to suggest that Greg doesn't have that. Obviously, he's been through trials that we have not been through. I have been through trials of my own, and I don't feel comfortable in even sharing them on this show. I admire Greg's courage, but let me say that. Well, I was going to say something, and I have lost it, and we are completely out of time.
Well,
way over time.
Let me answer your question at the very end of the show here. Your question was if my wife was open to it, or the option was on the table.
If you had if you met another woman like this
today, that would not. I know that that's not the case, so I go out of my way to avoid.
You know how to avoid it
potentially happening anymore.
Yes,
but there's the other aspect of it is. If we jump back in time a few years and that option was on the table, I absolutely would have wanted to pursue that. And I don't think that it would have made me love my wife any less. And I don't think that it would have necessarily been a detrimental aspect to our relationship.
See, I don't think there's anything wrong.
My wife understood it in the same way I did.
I don't think
she doesn't.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having friends of the opposite sex. But once you sense it crossing into the area of romance and sexual feelings, you probably need to cut it off. And I understand that that's painful, but you are putting yourself in a situation where you're trading one thing for another. And I understand you're arguing that polyamory solves that problem, but I'm not sure that it is the best solution. And that's all I've ever been arguing.
I'm saying that if it was not something that upset my wife, it would not be something that upset me.
Yes, but there's still a loss. Even if both of you are okay with it, there's still a loss.
I'm saying that therefore, because it would not be upsetting either of us, it should not be upsetting the relationship.
All right, executive producer, make your final statement, and then we're going to end the show, and it's Bob's turn.
All right, well, this has been Inspiring Honesty / Clash Course today, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for allowing me to confide in you and to help share this aspect of this story, and hopefully inspire you to consider your own lives and your own perspectives and see if anything that was said today has any relevance to you in a way that could help garner perspective for either something you yourself have felt or you've gone through in another situation.
Agreed.
I think that the honesty like this is a necessary aspect of our culture where people can see the reality of what other people do and the things that they generally hide for social reasons, and they want to avoid the stigma. So I've revealed myself to you, and I'm doing so with trust. Thank you. And join us again next week for Inspiring Honesty.
Best show ever. Unconventional Pastor coming up. Top it, Bob.
Yep. I'm going to be talking on my show about an experience that I'd had in the past that people have asked me about, and I rarely talk about, but we're going to deal with that, and I'm going to talk to you about what I believe is the kind of implications from that experience.
Coming up.